Do you know the rules of a seaside town? Not the ones in the tourist guides, but the real rules. You don't? Then you're lucky. But if you listen to what I'm about to tell you, you'll know them too. And once you know them, you can't and shouldn't forget them. Because those who forget die. My name is Michael Walker. I'm a fisherman, born and raised in this town. I've made my living on these waters for over 30 years, sometimes guiding tourists. I lost my right hand 3 years ago. Now, I use a metal hook in its place. The children call me Captain Hook, but I don't mind. My father, his father, and all the ancestors as far back as we can trace were all born in this town, worked these waters, and were buried in this soil. The Walker family gravestones lie quietly in the back of the old cemetery. Weather-beaten, their inscriptions faded, but they all bear the same pattern: premature deaths, accidents at sea, vanishings. The fate of those who don't know the rules or don't follow them. When I was a boy, my grandfather gave me my first warning in his dimly lit kitchen. His fingers were gnarled with arthritis, his voice hoarse from years of salt and wind. But his words were clear. The sea is a creature that trades, Michael. It takes in return for what it gives. But if you trade without knowing the rules, you'll always lose. I'm telling you this to warn you. If you're planning to visit this town, if you're looking for an interesting experience in a seaside town, engrave these 5 rules into your heart. Break them, and you die. This isn't a threat. It's a fact. We call this town the Swamp, not because it's actually a swamp. The town exists, there's a harbor, and there are houses. But the air is always damp, the fog rarely lifts, and the smell of salt permeates your skin and never leaves. Gray clouds perpetually cover the sky, and the rain rarely stops. And mold consumes everything, on the walls, on the boats, even on the old wooden houses. There are no seasons in this town, only rainy days and less rainy days. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, they're all painted in the same shade of gray. Tourists sometimes ask why we stay here. The answer is simple: there's nowhere else to go. Everyone who leaves this town eventually returns. The sea calls them back. This is our daily life. We don't question it. We just accept it and live. Most of the residents here make their living from fishing. It's how they've lived for centuries. There are no large office buildings, no institutions of higher learning, just boats, nets, and the sea. It's an honest living, even if it's tough. If you're lucky, you earn enough for bread, a few beers, and a winter coat. If you're unlucky, you go hungry and try again tomorrow. I'm a fisherman, and sometimes a tourist guide. My job is to take curious visitors out onto the sea. There are no beautiful sights here, no golden beaches, no clear skies, only gray rain and black waves. Still, sometimes someone comes, drawn by rumors, tales of ghosts, monsters, and curses. Perhaps everyone seeks out fear. Tourists want a real experience. They want safe fear, the kind you feel in the dark of a movie theater, the kind you can forget when you go home. But the fear in this town isn't a movie. It's real. And once you experience it, you'll never forget it. The first rule is simple: never swim where the deadlights are. On the calmest nights, faint glowing spears sometimes appear from the deep seabed. Fishermen call them dead lights. They're not fish or jellyfish. They're something else. Some say they are the souls of the drowned trapped in the darkness, seeking to drag the living down with them. Some seek a scientific explanation: bioluminescent plankton, reflected light from the deep sea, chemical reactions on the seafloor. But such explanations are useless. Oceanography textbooks don't describe lights that pull people to the bottom of the sea. Reality is stranger than books and far more dangerous. There's no warning. One moment, the sea surface is normal. The next, those lights are glowing far below. Yellow, green, white. The color doesn't matter. If you see them, get out of the water immediately. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a dive or walking in the shallows. If the dead lights appear, leave at once. If you don't, you'll never come back. There are stages to the dead lights. First, they appear as a single point of light, like a flashlight dropped on the seabed. But if you keep watching, it begins to split. One becomes two, two becomes four, and soon dozens of lights are dancing on the seabed. Once it reaches this stage, there's no more time to escape. The lights have found you, and they've chosen you. I heard a story from the man who had this job before me. It was a summer night. He had a tourist on his boat, a confident, senseless man in his 20s. The tourist wanted to swim in the sea for the thrill. The old guide warned him it was dangerous, told him it wasn't safe to swim at night. But the tourist laughed, called him dramatic, and jumped in. The guide gritted his teeth, staring at the surface. He didn't trust the night sea, not in these waters. Then he saw it, the dead light, a faintly glowing spear flickering beneath the surface, directly beneath the tourist. He yelled for the man to get out, told him to grab the ladder, but the tourist laughed again.
It's just jellyfish.
He shouted,
Bioluminescence. I read about it in a textbook.
and then the laughter stopped. According to the guide, the tourist froze, unmoving in the water. His expression changed in an instant. His eyes were wide, staring at something no one else could see. He looked down, and then he was gone. No splash, no sound, just gone. The surface was still, and the dead light vanished, as if it had never been there. The body washed ashore a few days later. I learned my lesson from that, and I haven't guided anyone after dark since. It's not worth the risk. The sea is beautiful, but it's also cruel, and the dead lights are proof of that. The second rule: always put wax in your ears when passing salt rock. Salt rock is a reef area, sticking out of the sea like broken bones. The rocks are sharp enough to tear a hull in seconds, and shipwrecks are scattered there like broken toys. It's a place you should never approach unless absolutely necessary. If you look at a map, Salt Rock is simply listed as a reef, marked with a red X as a danger zone with a mild warning to navigate with caution. But maps don't tell the truth. Maps don't tell you why this place is called a ship's graveyard, or why even the most experienced captains avoid it. It's not just the rocks that are dangerous. There's an unseen threat. Sirens live at Salt Rock, not the beautiful sirens of fairy tales. They can't be seen, but they can be heard. It starts as a low hum, something you feel in your bones before you hear it as a sound. As you get closer, the sound grows. It doesn't come all at once. It creeps up, gentle at first, like a lullaby carried on the wind. But if you listen to it, you're done for. The siren's song is addictive. Once you hear it, you want to hear it again. Survivors' accounts say the song becomes personal, the voice of a dead loved one, a childhood lullaby, the whisper of a lost lover. The sirens read your memories and sing your deepest desires. The siren's song pulls you towards the rocks, like a moth to a flame. You'll think it's the most beautiful sound you've ever heard. By the time you realize what's happening, your boat is splintered and you're drowning. That's why we use wax. Every fisherman carries it, a soft, sticky lump to block out sound. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. I always have some in my pocket, and I keep a tin on my boat. If you see me setting out, you'll see me pushing wax into my ears at the dock before I go anywhere near that place. There was a tourist once, in his 50s. He'd read about sirens online and didn't believe in old fishermen's tales. He wanted to see the shipwrecks. He waved cash in front of me, but I told him plainly, I won't go there, and neither should you. He found another boat. Someone desperate for money took him. I don't know what happened out there. When the boat returned, he wasn't on it. The man who took him didn't say a word. He just tied up his boat, got in his truck, and left town. Salt Rock has been like that for as long as I can remember. The rocks remain sharp, the shipwrecks pile up, and the sirens remain hungry. No one has ever tried to clear the wrecks or make a safe passage. It's not worth it. Like everything else around here, you leave it alone. The next rule is for fishermen. Always check your ropes. You might think a rope is just a rope. Something simple, nothing special. But here, a rope is a lifeline. It holds your nets, secures your boat, and keeps your catch from drifting away. Without them, you don't just lose your catch, you put yourself in danger. So we check the knots, the lines, the fibers. We don't leave it to chance. But no matter how careful you are, sometimes ropes just don't hold. Fishermen tell stories of finding their ropes frayed or cleanly bitten through. The ends have small, serrated teeth marks. The older fishermen call the culprits rope biters. No one's ever actually seen one, but the signs are always the same. Nets adrift, traps gone, and the thickest ropes bitten clean through. Because of the rope biters, we double-check every knot before we set out, and we never use cheap line. Some fishermen even perform rituals. My uncle believed spitting on a knot before casting it into the sea would keep the rope biters away. Others sprinkle salt on their nets to bless the lines. Me, I just check my ropes twice, sometimes 3 times, before I leave. It's worked so far. Then there's the hair tradition. Many fishermen around here grow their hair long, not for fashion, but for the sea. The old fishermen believe that by giving a part of yourself to the sea, you prevent it from taking everything. They tie strands of hair into knots and cast them into the sea as an offering. They say it distracts the creatures of the deep, keeps them from coming after the boat. My father taught me how to tie the strands correctly, so they wouldn't unravel before sinking. At first, it felt like a silly superstition, but one day, I forgot, and my boat kept drifting. No matter how tightly I tied the anchor, it kept tearing free. Since then, I've never forgotten again. You might think it's just a coincidence, but I keep the practice. Some of the younger ones laugh it off, call it old men's superstition, but they'll learn. Here, ignoring the old ways doesn't end well. And then there's the salt line. It doesn't happen often, maybe a few times in a fisherman's life, but when it does, it's seared into your memory forever. On a foggy day, sometimes a faint white line appears on the surface of the water. It stretches to the horizon, as if someone drew it on the sea with chalk. The salt line is unpredictable. It doesn't seem to relate to weather, currents, or the phases of the moon. Even the most experienced fishermen can't predict when it will appear. Some believe the salt line appears when the boundary between our world and another wears thin. There's no scientific explanation. If you ask an oceanographer, they'll just shrug. The old fishermen call it the salt line. They say it's a boundary between our world and something else. Cross it, and you'll go into waters from which you won't return. The waters beyond the salt line are no longer part of our world. They're something else. And once you go there, you vanish forever. I remember stories of a boat that went missing when I was a child. A small fishing crew, 3 men, vanished after a fog rolled in. Days later, their boat was spotted drifting near the salt line. Some fishermen swore they saw the crew waving for help, but no one went near. They knew. A boat beyond the salt line isn't alive anymore. The wood looks too old, too rotted, yet it floats. And the people, if you can call them people, don't look right either. They're pale, as if they've been in the water too long, and their movements are stiff, unnatural. If you see a boat beyond the salt line, turn back. Don't wave back. Don't call out. Don't go near. And if someone on that boat is waving at you, ignore them. They're dead, even if they don't know it themselves. I've only seen the salt line once. Early one morning, in a fog so thick I couldn't see 10 feet in front of me, I found it, a thin white line across the water. It didn't look like much, just a faint shimmer, but the moment I saw it, my stomach sank. I reeled in my nets faster than I ever have before and turned my boat around. It didn't matter that my catch wasn't finished. I wasn't going to stay to find out what was on the other side. On the way back, I thought I saw something in the fog, a shadow of a boat drifting near the salt line. I didn't slow down to check. I didn't stare. I just kept going. When I told the other fishermen what I'd seen, they just nodded, as if it was nothing. One clapped me on the back and said I did the right thing. Since then, I haven't been out in the fog. If fog rolls in while I'm on the water, I head straight back. Let the sea keep its secrets. I don't need to know. The last rule is the simplest, but perhaps the most important. Never go near the lighthouse. The lighthouse stands on a barren island, a lonely black silhouette against the horizon. Nothing grows there. No trees, no grass, not even the stubborn plants that cling to rocks elsewhere. The island is dead. Even birds avoid it, flying miles around it. Fishermen do the same. Only the desperate or the foolish go near. The lighthouse has been abandoned for as long as I've been alive. No one tells why. Some say the keeper vanished one night without a trace. Others claim the lighthouse was never meant to guide ships. Whatever the truth, everyone agrees on one thing. It's cursed. Don't go near it. Don't stare at it for too long. And don't trust its light if it comes on. The light shouldn't come on. No one's there to switch it on. The pier has rotted away, and the only boat that could navigate there sank years ago. But sometimes, in the dead of night, the light glows anyway, cutting through the fog as if searching for someone. If you have binoculars, you can spot strange things scattered across the island. A red backpack, a yellow notepad, sneakers, a hair comb. Small things that shouldn't be there. People say they belong to those who drowned or vanished near the lighthouse. Mostly tourists. People who didn't understand the importance of the rules or who thought they could handle it. The first time I saw the light, I was 15. It was late, after dark, and my friends and I were sitting on the pier, watching the waves. The rain had stopped, and the silence was heavy, a windless day. And then the light came on. At first, it was faint, barely noticeable through the fog. Then it grew brighter, sweeping back and forth across the water. Daniel joked that the lighthouse had
come alive.
He laughed, but there was tension in his voice. None of us said anything. We just stared. Finally, Jimmy, an older boy who was already working on a fishing boat, stood up. He didn't hesitate. He told us to look away, grabbed my arm, and pulled me to my feet. Jimmy had the kind of authority that came from knowing things we didn't. None of us questioned him. We followed him back to town without a word. When we got there, he told us plainly, never speak of what we saw. He warned us that the light wasn't to be trusted. It wasn't guiding anyone. It was luring them. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I do now. The lighthouse doesn't guide you to safety. It beckons you. And if you follow it, you won't come back. There are many stories about those who didn't heed the advice. Like the couple who thought the lighthouse was romantic. They rented a small boat and rowed out, ignoring all warnings. When the fog rolled in, they vanished. Days later, their boat was found drifting near the lighthouse, empty. Then there was a local man who decided to camp on the island. He said the rules were
Old superstitions.
He rowed out with his tent and supplies, determined to prove there was nothing to fear. By morning, his boat had washed ashore. He wasn't there. All the villagers found was his flashlight, lying dead in the sand. Since that night on the pier, I've seen the light several times. I no longer look directly at it. I turn my eyes away, focus on something else, and wait for it to vanish. It always does. No one knows why it happens. Some say the lighthouse has a will of its own and turns on when it senses someone nearby. Others think it's a signal to call something back to the island. Whatever the reason, the rule remains the same. Stay away. Leave the lighthouse to be forgotten. We don't need it in our waters. And if you ever see that light glowing through the fog, remember, no one is manning that lighthouse. Whatever is turning that light on, it's not human. Finally, there's a story I have to tell you about how I lost my right hand. I don't talk about it often, but if you're going to understand the rules, their true weight, you need to know. It happened on a gray summer day years ago. Tourist season, if you could call it that. This town doesn't get floods of tourists, but sometimes strangers drift through. They're easy to spot. Clean clothes, wide eyes, looking at a painting instead of a real place. That summer, there were more tourists than usual. It happens sometimes when the stories about this place spread too far. Rumors spark curiosity, and suddenly people want to see it for themselves. At first, it was good. It always is. We sold more fish. The souvenir shop had its best sales in years, and even the bar was lively. Strangers exchanged exaggerated tales about this place. Noise meant business, so no one complained. But here, peace never lasts long. Never. One family stood out among the tourists. A mother, a father, and their teenage son. They seemed normal enough, middle class, gleaming sneakers, a decent car. The kind of people who sought a real experience instead of a cheap resort. They rented a small room at the inn and stayed for a week. The parents mostly kept to themselves, walking the beach and taking pictures, but the son was different. He was a college student studying marine biology, and you could tell he loved it. I heard him talking to the older fisherman about how he wanted to work with sharks and coral reefs someday. Dreams too big for this place. But what really fascinated him were the stories of sea monsters. He listened to every tale about the dead lights, the sirens, the shipwrecks, like a child opening Christmas presents. His questions were fast and endless. What did the fishermen think the dead lights were? Were the sirens real? Had anyone seen the boat beyond the salt line? Looking back, the signs were obvious. The curiosity, the questions, the gleam in his eyes when someone listened to his stories. But in the moment, it was just peaceful, even a little heartwarming. After a lifetime in a forgotten town, it's not often you get to experience someone being genuinely interested. The son spent his days sketching boats or writing notes in a small leather journal. He wasn't bothering anyone, so no one told him to leave. When he wasn't sketching, he was talking to deckhands and fishermen like old friends. He was particularly obsessed with the lighthouse, though he didn't say it outright. But I noticed his questions always returned to it. Had anyone sailed the furthest out? Had anyone been to the lighthouse? Did the light mean anything? Most fishermen brushed him off, but a few humored him, giving him the usual warnings. Don't go near. Don't trust the light. The island is cursed. They spoke like they were warning a child about touching a hot stove. He laughed, called it folklore, but his curiosity only grew. By the end of the week, the family had become a familiar sight. The parents had their routine, but the son stayed by the docks, asking questions and sketching. Some of the fishermen liked him, said he reminded them of their own kids when they were full of questions instead of complaints. You can't blame them for not seeing. Curiosity can seem harmless, but in this town, curiosity is dangerous. Too much of it, and you stop seeing the rules as rules. You start thinking of them as challenges. I've seen it happen. Tourists who think the stories are just stories. Locals who get overconfident. It never ends well. The day everything changed started like any other. Gray sky, light drizzle, weather so typical you don't even notice it anymore. I was preparing for a tour with a few tourists. A slow morning, the sea feeling heavier, as if holding secrets. When I got back to the pier, the family was there. The parents waved politely, but the son wasn't with them. I thought he was sketching or bothering an older fisherman. It wasn't until evening, when the fog began to creep in, that I realized I hadn't seen him all day. It wasn't uncommon for tourists to get lost, but something bothered me. I shook it off, telling myself he was probably back at the inn, safe. But deep down, I already knew. The signs were there, and I'd ignored them. I just didn't know what it would cost me yet. In the evening, I knew it was wrong. The boys' parents burst into the bar. Their faces were pale and strained. The mother clutched a piece of paper in her hand, trembling too much to keep it still. The father's jaw was tight, his expression set between fear and anger. They asked if anyone had seen their son, looking around imploringly. The son hadn't been seen all day by anyone. Not by me, not by any other fisherman, by no one. That alone was bad enough. But it got worse when his mother unfolded the note she held and read it aloud, her voice trembling. That afternoon, he was going to Salt Rock. Salt Rock, of all the places he could have gone. Why there? At first, it didn't make sense until I remembered all the questions he'd asked, all the stories he'd listened to tirelessly. He wasn't just curious about the sea. He was curious about the secrets, the things no one dared to touch. And now, he seemed to have gone looking for them. The mother was near tears, panic visible in her eyes. The father seemed calmer on the outside, but I could see the helplessness hidden behind his stern expression. They were scared, and with good reason. I don't have children of my own, but I've always had a soft spot for kids. They remind me of a time when life was simpler, before I knew what the sea could do. When I heard where the son had gone, I acted before I thought. I told the parents to stay in the bar, warm, dry, and safe. They absolutely could not go there themselves and get into more trouble. As soon as the parents sat down, the other fishermen began to whisper among themselves. There was no way they were going out there. They had warned him repeatedly. There was nothing we could do. But there's a child out there, I said. No one answered. They just stared at me, and no one moved. Not a single one. A few looked down at their drinks, avoiding my eyes. Others looked at the parents sitting quietly in the corner. The mother was still clutching that paper. No one offered to come with me. Their silence said everything, but I couldn't blame them. They had families, kids to feed. Salt Rock isn't a place to risk your life for one foolish tourist. Logically, they were right. But logic doesn't help when you see a mother's face, pale with terror. There was no time to argue. I turned and walked out. If no one else was going to help, I would do it myself. The first thing I did was take out my knife and cut a long braid from my hair. I tied it into a knot, the way my father had taught me. My hands moved quickly, surely, a part of myself for the sea. A small offering, a distraction. I don't know how effective it is, but it was better than nothing. Next, I packed extra wax into my bag. Salt Rock isn't a place to go unprepared. The sirens there don't care who you are or why you've come. They'll drown you just the same if you're not careful. The wax was my best defense, and I wasn't leaving without it. Finally, I inspected my ropes, checking every knot and line twice, and a third time to be sure. The sea was restless, and it wouldn't tolerate the slightest mistake. Rope biter or no, my lines had to hold. If they didn't, I'd lose both myself and the sun. When everything was ready, I pushed my boat from the pier and climbed aboard. I started the engine and headed straight for Salt Rock. The wind was cold on my face, and the spray of water stung my skin, but I didn't stop. The jagged rocks loomed ahead, their sharp edges rising from the sea. I gripped the tiller tighter and steered towards the dark horizon. It didn't take long to reach Salt Rock, but every minute felt like an eternity. The waves were rough, and the wind howled as if trying to tear me from the tiller. I pushed the wax firmly into my ears and scanned the waters around the rocks. The rocks jutted out like spears, dark and sharp, and the wrecked ships clinging to them looked like skeletons. I called his name again and again. I strained my voice against the roaring sea. The crashing waves were deafening, even with the wax dulling the sound. I yelled as loud as I could, hoping he would hear me and call back. Then, at the edge of my vision, I caught a flicker of movement. Something in the water, a tail, or maybe a fin. It was there for a second, and then it was gone. And then I remembered my father's words. He had told me that if you want to take something back from the sea, something it has already claimed, you have to offer something in return.
The sea doesn't give for free,
He once told me. I used to think it was just one of his old rambling tales, but now those words felt like my only hope. I stopped shouting and stood at the edge of the boat, staring into the dark waves. I know you have him. Give him back. He's just a child, I said. The sea didn't answer. The waves kept crashing, and the wind kept howling. My father said the sea might listen, but only if you gave it something in return. I took a breath, steadied myself against the rocking of the boat, and spoke again. What do you want? What will it take to get him back? The waves didn't stop, but something shifted. Not something I could see or hear, but a change in the air, as if the sea was considering my words. Then, with a soft thud, something bumped against the side of the boat. I leaned over to look, and there it was, a piece of driftwood, smooth and thin from years in the water. It floated there, gently tapping against the hull, as if waiting for me. Carefully, I pulled it up and turned it over in my hands. And then I saw it, carved into the surface, in jagged letters that looked like they'd been etched by something sharp. There was one word, hand. The weight of what it meant dropped on me like a lead anchor. I stared at it. Sirens are greedy creatures. They don't bargain lightly, and once they ask for something, they don't accept substitutes. I knew it was useless to offer anything else. It was my hand or nothing. I looked down at the dark water, imagining the boy's pale face beneath it, his lungs filling with seawater, his life draining away with every second. There was no time to think. No time to argue. No time to hesitate. "All right," I said aloud. "It's a deal." I looked down at my right hand, hanging over the edge of the boat. The index finger was slightly crooked from gripping the tiller for long hours. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I reached for the knife on my belt. The blade was sharp. I kept it that way for cutting ropes, and it glinted faintly in the gray light. I gritted my teeth, placed the blade just above my wrist, and steadied myself with a deep breath. The pain was immediate and unnatural, but I didn't stop. I cut through and watched as my hand dropped into the water. The sea swallowed it instantly, the waves pulling it down as if it had never existed. My left hand moved by instinct, grabbing a rope and tying it tightly around the stump to stop the bleeding. The knot was strong, and then everything went still. The waves, the wind, the very air seemed to hold its breath. Then I heard it, a faint, dull thud against the side of the boat. And there he was, the boy. His face was pale, his hair plastered to his head, but he was alive. He was pounding his fist against the hull, scratching at the edge with his other hand, trying to hold on. I grabbed him with my left arm and, with all the strength I had left, pulled him onto the deck. He collapsed, coughing for air, seawater pouring from his mouth. I knelt beside him, and a wave of relief washed over me, despite the throbbing pain in my arm. He was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he was alive. "It's all right," I said. "You're safe now. You're safe now." He looked up at me. Confusion and fear mixed in his eyes. He tried to say something, but no sound came out. He just nodded and gripped my sleeve. That's when he noticed my missing hand.
Your hand.
He rasped. "Don't worry about it," I said. "Let's get you home." I forced myself to my feet and stumbled to the tiller. Steering the boat with one hand wasn't easy, but I managed. I kept my grip on the tiller, heading for shore. The waves fought me every step of the way, but I held on. The boy's breathing was shallow, and it was clear he wasn't safe yet. His lungs were full of water, and his body was weak. I had to get him to the hospital fast. When I reached the pier, the other fishermen were waiting. They pulled the boy out and carried him to his parents. His parents wept with relief. His mother hugged him tightly, tears soaking his shirt. His father stood with a hand on his shoulder. The boy and I were rushed to the hospital, miles away. He survived, barely. The doctors said if I'd been even a minute later, he wouldn't have made it. As for me, they did the best they could with what was left of my arm. The knot I tied had stopped the bleeding, but my arm would never be whole again. The boy's parents thanked me again and again, their words spilling out in a flood of gratitude. There wasn't much for me to say. I did what had to be done, and I paid the price. That's how it works in the sea. You don't get something for nothing. And so, some time has passed. The children call me Captain Hook now. I don't mind. It's a childish name, quite endearing, really. I let them call me that. Sometimes I even play along. I admit, I look the part of a pirate. My long hair is braided on one side, though it's mostly gray now. When I'm on the pier, I smoke my pipe, the smell of tobacco mingling with the salty air. My jacket is old, patched in places, and my face looks like the sea itself, worn and rough, like driftwood washed ashore. And, of course, there's the hook. Nothing fancy, just a simple curve of metal where my hand used to be. But it's well polished, and it does the job. I learned quickly to work with it. I can tie knots, haul nets, steer the boat, and even carve wood like I used to. Life doesn't stop just because you've lost a part of yourself. You adapt. You keep going. Things went back to normal after that day. The boy lived. I never saw him or his family again after he left the hospital. He sent me a postcard once when he graduated college. Good kid. The sea hasn't changed much, and neither has the town. The rain still falls, the clouds still hang low, and the air still smells of salt. The mold still creeps up the walls, as if trying to reclaim the town bit by bit. Fishermen still go out every day, and tourists still wander in, drawn by the same old stories. The dead lights, the salt line, salt rock, and the lighthouse, they're all still here, waiting for someone to forget the rules. I still warn every tourist who passes through town. Some listen, some don't. It's not my job to make them believe, only to tell them what they need to know. I share my stories wherever I can, on the boat, around the fire, over a drink at the bar. The stories keep people alive here. They teach the rules in a persistent way, even if they don't realize it at the time. They make you think before you step into danger, before you take risks you don't understand. Life goes on. It always does, quiet and unyielding. The sea doesn't care about what we've lost or what we've been scarred by. It just keeps moving, wave after wave, tide after tide. All we can do is live with it. Sometimes, in the dead of night, the tip of my hook aches. Not a phantom pain, it's a signal from the sea, a reminder of the bargain, a recollection of the price paid and the reward received. On nights like that, I sit by the window, watching the dark water, and thinking about all the lost souls still out there. So, if you ever happen to wander into that small coastal town called the swamp, which isn't actually a swamp, I suggest you follow the rules. They're simple, but they're unforgiving. Don't swim where the dead lights are. Don't cross the salt line. Always carry wax. And don't go to the lighthouse. Most importantly, never go near Salt Rock. And if you ever meet an old fisherman with a hook, the one the kids call Captain Hook, listen to his story. He knows the price, and he wants to make sure you don't have to pay it. The sea has power, and it doesn't care if you understand it. But if you respect it and follow its rules, you might live to tell the tale. And if you ever see a light glowing through the fog in the dead of night, remember, no one is manning that lighthouse. Whatever is turning that light on, it's not human. And above all, never say it's just a story. The rules are real. The danger is real. And the price paid, it never comes back.